Here is a look at the Patriots receivers signed for next season. You have Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Tyquan Thornton, and that's pretty much it. Myers and Aguilar are both unrestricted free agents, and that is where we begin our deep dive as the Boston Herald's Andrew Callahan joins us as well. Okay, I'm just going to lay this out here before we get to this conversation. We all know offensive line is probably their biggest positional need. They need a tackle. We don't want to talk about tackles. We want to talk about wide, flashy wide receivers. So we are going to gloss over that and maybe talk about it another
tackles
day.
Are people
today,
too, Trenni.
They are,
tackles
but today we're
too.
talking about the fast and furious wide receivers. So is the biggest offseason priority re-signing Jakobi Meyers?
I don't think so, because I think he might get priced out. And that's the whole deal with free agency, right? Is who can you get at what price? And when you look at Jakobi Meyers, he's probably coming in at about $14-15 million, maybe a little bit under that in free agency as the best wide receiver. If I'm paying that for a receiver, I think I could get someone better in the trade market for what you could get from Jakobi Meyers next year.
I think it's interesting, too, with Jakobi Meyers because he might suffer from so much of what we've seen with players on both sides of the ball for the Patriots. Teams will look at him and go, but his measurables aren't that good. He doesn't get that great a separation sometimes. He's not going to be as good with us, which I think is a harder case to make with Jakobi Meyers, given that he did it with Mac Jones and Matt Patricia is his offensive coordinator. It's not the Brady disclaimer that accompanies his production.
He just doesn't have that trait that so many offenses are looking for, though, which is speed. And he'll acknowledge it. He's pretty funny about talking to us about how, I guess I'm just so slow they forget about me sometimes. He'll say things like that. I think he is the priority because I think even if you trade for a receiver, and I know we're going to get to some of these guys, you are going to have to give up something of significance in terms of draft capital, i.e. maybe a first-round pick, depending on who it is, and then you have to pay them a new deal. I would be okay with paying Jakobi Meyers maybe even less than whoever that new receiver is without giving up the draft capital, and you give Mac Jones his binky.
He's worth the $14 million to the Patriots because when you look at how often they've taken a flamethrower to stacks of millions, $10 million to Isaiah Wynn, and Jonnu Smith, who might still have some relevance, is going to have, I believe, a $17 million cap hit. It'd be 19 if they released him. They have spent and gotten little in return. At least if you spend 14 on him, you know you're going to get something back.
And he might be a captain. Like, I've spoken to people just this week who say, like, if McCourty and or Slater leave and there's some openings there, this is a guy who's a perfect fit. He's just not under contract as a captain.
And the other argument you can make, I think, for Jakobi Meyers is that he is comfortable with Mac Jones, and if you bring in another offensive coordinator, you have consistency there.
That's right.
Yeah, here's the other part about this, though. When you look at the roster and the way it's constructed due to the terms and you're looking at the recent draft history, if you bring back Jakobi Meyers, you're essentially running it back with the whole offense, which you could say in 2021 was effective. I just don't think that's going to be the case here. And for me, you need an upgrade at receiver because it's not coming at tight end for the reason you mentioned, Tom, about the cap hit with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. The offensive line needs a revamping. It'll happen in the draft and free agency. And the running backs are going to be the same minus Damian Harris. So I think this is a group you need to take charge of and say, we need someone who scares an opposing defense because talking to people around the league, they tell me that's the issue. Our defensive coordinators sleep very well at night because your number one receiver is still Jakobi Meyers.
All right, the question is, where does that dynamic wide receiver come from? Because as you take a look here, not exactly a banner crop of receivers in this year's free agent class. One of the best is one of the Patriots' own, Jakobi Meyers. He and Juju Smith-Schuster were the only two free agent wideouts with more than 800 receiving yards this season. Some of the other notable names that could be available: Odell Beckham Jr., Alan Lazard, Darius Slayton, and Mac Hollins.
Big Paris Campbell guy back in the day.
Yeah, not sure.
You were the one.
That's not a class that's going to make a defensive coordinator go, oh boy, Alan Lazard, now I got to worry about the Patriots. So how do you get a wide receiver that is going to do what Andrew was talking about, Phil? How do you get a guy that's going to challenge defenses and maybe draw even a single team or a double team so that the other guys can be more productive?
It's trade. It's not via free agency. And I don't think, based on this team's history and based on probably where they should be investing in the draft, it's the draft. So to me, it's trade. And the name that I like best, who could potentially, maybe, possibly be available, is T. Higgins from Cincinnati. He's going in the last year of his rookie contract. We know these are the types of players, in terms of contractually speaking, that Bill Belichick has targeted in the past. That guy's a true number one on a team that already has a superstar number one. Can they really pay, especially in Cincinnati, really pay Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow all the big money deals that they're hoping for? The issue, Tom, is A.J. Brown just got dealt last year in a similar situation right before the last year of his rookie deal. You gave him a first-round pick for that guy? Are you willing to give up a first-round pick
And a contract.
and a shiny new contract to T. Higgins moving forward?
And that's the hard thing is because is T. Higgins walking in the door all new and shiny going to be a better player than Jakobi Meyers? Nelson Aguilar certainly wasn't for 3 times the cost. And that's where, and not to get too deep in on the cap, that's where your hands end up tied with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and the money well spent on Matt Judon. If you're going to pay Jakobi Meyers, which I think should be the top of your priority list, you get those 2 tackles in, and yeah, you can be just like 2021. I do say run the mother scratcher back with the same guys and somebody who can put the O's where they're supposed to go to offset the X's. There's only one position that is the cure-all, and nobody knows it but me.
See, the problem with that is you didn't beat any good defenses
Well,
in 2021.
are you going to say tackle?
Nope.
Fullback?
Nope. Third down back / slot receiver, the water bug. They have no water bug.
Those are two different.
Well, we're going to get to that.
It's a water bug. You could split them. Don't you start arguing.
We're gonna
Water bug.
get to Curran's obsession with the water bug in a second. But first, who would you like them? If they could trade for someone, who would you go after that maybe allows you to have Jakobi Meyers and trade for someone and have both guys on your roster?
Right, and you made a good point about this. If you bring in a number 1, or let's say a 1B or 2A, it restores the order of the depth chart to its natural order. Devontae Parker's your number 2. Terrific. Kendrick Bourne, Tyquan Thornton can fight it out for your number 3. Great. They feel matchups that they can take advantage of. I'm looking at someone who's like Jakobi Meyers 2.0. Body type, position, Keenan Allen. He would cost $14.5 million. Next year, the Chargers they have an easy pass to Capel. You say, we'll take him off your hands. Like DeAndre Hopkins, going to be 31. 2 years left in his deal, which fits Mac Jones's window, and he's a guy who can play inside now. Also,
But what if he can't play?
Isn't he always broken?
No, he's not. He's a route running genius. He'd be the best thing in the world.
He's not ever broken?
I didn't say not ever.
this year,
Okay.
but when he was healthy, his per
He's
game
gonna fight with me
averages,
the whole time.
yards, catches,
he's an elderly gentleman. Is he over 30 at the receiver
I mean, if
position?
we're excited about DeAndre Hopkins, he's the same age. Both going to be 31. Yeah, I can't take that. I also turned 31. I'm
Let's
not
be
taking
honest,
any
yeah.
of this as the youngest guy on set. But I'm just looking at him in
Oh,
the fifth.
shots fired.
He'll also have the least hair.
Yeah,
so we
right.
can cover all
I
of
got a
that.
guy for that.
Yeah, I heard. But Keenan Allen fits in so many different levels. It just comes down to money and, as Phil mentioned, the trade compensation, which I think would be a real issue for them. The good news is, for once, the Patriots are in the top 20% in terms of draft capital. I think you spend a little bit because of the effect it has, really a trickle-down effect for your whole offense.
Imagine if you're Keenan Allen and you go from Nolan Ryan to Gaylord Perry. I'm dating myself with a couple of baseball references, but
I gotcha.
holy crap.
Sunny California.
It's still not
Foxborough.
here yet. It's still not here.
Okay, so
I'm saying just-
maybe get yourself a water bug. We're going to bring Tom Giles in for that portion of the conversation because, Curran, you are convinced you don't need a number 1. They can go streaking down the field. All you need is a Julian Edelman type.
You need, as he pointed out, as all of us would point out at one time or another, you need somebody who makes a defensive coordinator's hands sweat. On third down, who'd made their hands sweat? Jakobi Meyers, maybe once in a while. Hunter Henry,
really
once in a
no
while.
one.
That's why you were the worst team in the red zone over the course of the year. One of the worst on third down. Nobody could get separation to be a quick answer. That quick answer has been through the years. Kevin Falk, it's been Shane Vereen, it's been Danny Woodhead, it has been James White. How am I almost forgetting him? It's been Julian Edelman, it has been Danny Amendola, it has been Troy Brown.
Wes Welker was pretty good.
He was also a productive guy.
Why did Ramondre Stevenson fall short, though, for you? For a guy
He's
who's
too
top 10
big.
touch?
He's too big. He's not that quick. He's not going to water bug somebody. He's not going to come up on a linebacker, shifty, and turn around. He's just not that guy, Giles.
No, okay. Well, the direction I want to go into, I want to go back to what Andrew Callahan mentioned, which was DeAndre Hopkins. And I know that Burt Breer was up here maybe last week talking about all the reasons that you don't want DeAndre Hopkins. And all I heard was, great. Then the price for DeAndre Hopkins shouldn't be what it should be for a true number 1 wide receiver. You should be able to get him on the cheap, somewhat of a reclamation project if maybe he doesn't have the best image out there. $19 million next year, $15-ish million the year after that as far as cap hits go. DeAndre Hopkins, Bill Belichick loves him, was having that nice one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, but then
on
do you-
All or
do you
Nothing
not-
on the HBO Hard Knocks.
What happens then if you really want Bill O'Brien? So who's more important then, DeAndre Hopkins or Bill O'Brien? Because I don't think those two can coexist.
That is the interesting thing to me. And honestly, if you think you can get DeAndre Hopkins at a great price and you're still nowhere close to getting Bill O'Brien, then go ahead and get the player.
Yeah, he's right about that. If you're close to, and you think DeAndre Hopkins is a guy, I just don't think DeAndre Hopkins, despite the fact that he was on Jerry Rice pace through the first 4 seasons of his career, I don't know if he's that guy, Phil.
He's not quote unquote, that guy in terms of forcing teams to shade over the top with a safety because he's really not fast. That's just not his game. It really kind of has never been his game, but he's a great contested catch player. He can catch the ball down the field. Of course, former basketball player, like goes up and gets that rebound. But again, wrong side of 30. He wouldn't cost as much as the Cardinals paid for him, but you're giving something up in terms of draft capital, and you're paying him dough. I know Bill Belichick loves him. That's just a hard marriage for me to envision.
I think ultimately the Patriots get outbid for him, but the other part that we're all missing in this is a no-trade clause. If DeAndre Hopkins doesn't want to come to New England, regardless of the contracts or any tweaks, he doesn't have to. He just says, no, I'm not going to Foxborough. I'm not going from Kyler Murray to Mac Jones. If there's something to be worked out there, though, I think ultimately the Patriots get outbid. You're looking at teams like the Bears, the Falcons, who might be behind in terms of a rebuild. They've got a lot more dough than the Patriots, who can say, help our young quarterback along. We're going to give you an all-pro outside.
Where do you guys fall on the number one wide receiver, the Keenan Allen, the DeAndre Hopkins versus, as our producer just called the jitterbug? I think he meant waterbug, but I like jitterbug. The jug.
You just can't, to me, with number one wide receivers, you can't overextend. And the Patriots tried to create one with Nelson Aguilar, and it became a real sticking point.
But what if you don't try to create one? What if you get an actual number one?
If it's not there, and we looked at the list earlier, it's not there. And if it's not, T. Higgins might be a number one. Keenan Allen might be, it certainly has been a number one. But to me, don't force it. You have enough skill position guys on this team to move the ball.
What's funny is they didn't have that guy 2 seasons ago, right? And the same thing that defensive coordinators were telling us or are telling us now is what they were telling us a full calendar year ago, which is they need somebody who can go up and get an explosive pass from Mac Jones. They added Devontae Parker, who, when healthy, was pretty good in that regard.
What I mean.
But he's not a dominant player that requires multiple sets of eyes. The number one guy can change everything. The water bug, the jitterbug, whatever you want to call them, those guys can be found, generally speaking, day 3 of the draft.
Agreed.
That's just the nature of those skill sets.
Or year 2 of their careers, a la Pierre Strong.
Or Braxton.
Get him off the kickoff team.